In the final months before the collapse, Earth was no longer the center of human pride. It had become a battlefield waiting to be conquered. The Xarn Dominion, a ruthless alien empire known for its brutality and bioengineered armies, had already destroyed 5 of humanity's outer colonies. Their ships were living things covered in pulsing armor and lined with jagged, bone-like weapons that tore through metal like paper. Every attempt to stop them ended in disaster. Human warships, no matter how advanced or heavily armed, were no match for the swarm tactics of the Xarn. The sky above Mars turned red with fire when the last defense fleet was crushed, leaving nothing behind but wreckage and silence. Earth's leaders tried to rally the remaining colonies, but fear spread faster than orders. Even trusted allies turned away, cutting communications and abandoning the fight. Panic began to rise among the people, and cities that once stood proud were now preparing for their end. Satellites picked up enemy signals approaching Earth's system, and the world braced for the final attack. Deep underground, in hidden war bunkers, military commanders argued over desperate plans. They knew no one was coming to help. The truth was cold and clear. Humanity stood alone. It was in those moments, buried in silence and dread, that someone whispered the name of a forgotten project, one that had been shut down for being too dangerous. Project Revenant. The words carried fear, but also a spark of hope. It was a last resort, a program that had trained a small group of human soldiers in secret, turning them into something more than soldiers, something close to weapons. They had been enhanced with forbidden technology, pushed beyond normal limits, then locked away when the galaxy no longer needed monsters. But now, with Earth facing extinction, monsters were exactly what humanity needed. The top generals held one final meeting in the ruins of the orbital station above Earth. They had no fleets left, no allies to call, and no time. The decision was made in silence. The command was sent through encrypted channels to a hidden facility buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. Inside, a machine stirred to life, blinking a signal across dark chambers lined with cryopods. 12 figures, frozen in time, began to awaken. Their eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly in the dim blue light. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the revenants, humanity's last hope, born in secret, trained in war, and now awakened for the greatest mission of their lives. As the alarms echoed through the icy walls, and the sky above filled with the dark shapes of the Xarn fleet closing in, a new kind of war was about to begin. One that would not be fought with numbers or ships, but with 12 soldiers who had nothing left to lose. Deep beneath the icy surface of Antarctica, hidden from satellites and forgotten by most of Earth's command, a silent facility stirred after decades of silence. The cold halls, built into the rock and reinforced with secret alloys, had remained untouched since the end of the last galactic conflict. Only the top military minds had access to its secrets, and even fewer had the authority to activate what lay inside. When the order finally came, an encrypted command buried in old war protocols, it was not sent with words, but with a single signal: awaken the revenants. Red lights blinked to life, cutting through the shadows like sharp warnings, and steel doors creaked open, revealing a room lined with large cryopods, each one containing a sleeping warrior. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the result of Earth's most dangerous experiment, a program so controversial it had been erased from history. Known only as Project Revenant, it had created a unit of humans enhanced beyond natural limits through forbidden science, brutal training, and technology banned by the old galactic treaties. The cost of making them was high. Many had died during the early stages, their bodies unable to handle the modifications, but the few who survived became something more stronger, faster, and far deadlier than any soldier Earth had ever seen. But they had also become unstable, unpredictable, and too dangerous to control. That's why they were locked away, frozen in time, hidden where no one could ever find them until now. As the stasis pods hissed and the ice around them cracked, 12 figures slowly opened their eyes, confused at first, then focused as years of training and instincts returned. The lights above them flickered as backup power took over, and the voice of the old facility AI filled the chamber with calm instructions. One by one, they stepped out, men and women who looked human but moved like predators, each one carrying memories of missions so violent they had been classified forever. At their head was Captain Eric Dane, a man thought long dead, a legend even among ghosts. His face showed no emotion as he reviewed the mission briefing flashing across a nearby holoscreen. The Exarn Dominion had reached Earth. The last defense fleets had fallen. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction. Their orders were simple: infiltrate and destroy the enemy's main supply fleet deep in Zarn-controlled space. It was a suicide mission, but none of them flinched. They had been trained for worse. Without speaking, the team moved through the facility, collecting weapons, armor, and tools designed for war in the darkest parts of space. Each suit they wore adjusted to their body, syncing with implants and neural links as if welcoming them home. The weapons they carried were experimental blades that could cut through alien armor, guns that adjusted their firepower in real time, and drones programmed to act as both scouts and silent killers. Before leaving, they stopped at a sealed vault marked with a warning symbol long forgotten by the world. Inside were the remains of old missions, trophies from battles that never made the news. Eric placed his hand on a small metal box, opened it, and revealed a patch with their unit's old symbol, a skull half covered in fire. He placed it on his chest, and the others followed without a word. Moments later, they boarded a stealth ship hidden beneath the ice. The vessel was small, fast, and nearly invisible to sensors, a relic from the old wars. As it powered up, the ice above cracked, and a tunnel opened, launching them into the dark skies above Earth. From orbit, they could see what the world had become: cities burning in the distance, military stations in ruins, and enemy ships moving like sharks through the stars. There was no sadness in their eyes, only focus. The Revenants did not mourn. They fought. The AI briefed them as they entered deep space, taking hidden routes through asteroid fields and abandoned colonies. Their path led straight into enemy territory, and every second brought them closer to a fleet that had never been touched by human hands. The Xarn believed Earth was finished. They believed no one could strike back. They had no idea what was coming for them. In silence, the 12 soldiers prepared themselves. They cleaned their weapons, checked their gear, and reviewed enemy data. Each one remembered who they had been before the project: families lost, lives stolen, names erased. Now they were only warriors, bound by purpose, driven by something deeper than orders. As the ship entered stealth mode and slipped past the first enemy patrol, the mission began. In the darkness of space, unnoticed by the enemy, humanity's deadliest soldiers moved like shadows, ready to do what no one else could. The Revenants had awakened not for glory, not for revenge, but because they were the last line between survival and extinction. The black void of space offered no comfort, only silence and danger as the Revenant's stealth ship glided past Zarn patrols, like a ghost slipping through shadows. Every second brought them deeper into enemy territory, far from Earth's broken orbit, far from any hope of rescue. Inside the ship, tension hung like a thick fog, but not one of the 12 soldiers spoke a word of fear or doubt. They were built for this, for the impossible. Their destination was the Exarn Dominion's central logistics carrier, a monstrous vessel the size of a small moon, where enemy resources, weapons, and reinforcements were gathered before deployment. Taking it down wouldn't just be a victory, it would cripple the Xarn war machine and give Earth a chance to breathe. But getting inside such a ship was suicide for anyone who wasn't a Revenant. As the ship approached the edge of the enemy fleet, Eric Dane stood at the center of the team, eyes locked on the tactical display showing thousands of Xarn ships forming a near-impenetrable wall around their target. There were no blind spots, no weak points, only overlapping sensor grids and patrol routes designed to detect even the faintest anomaly. But the Revenants had come prepared. The stealth ship released a cloud of decoys, mimicking debris from a destroyed transport, while masking its own signal. Then, at the perfect moment, it latched onto the hull of a smaller Xarn frigate using magnetic clamps and began cutting its way inside. The breach was silent, precise, and by the time Xarn sentries noticed a drop in power readings, the Revenants were already moving through the ship like shadows in a nightmare. Their armor adjusted to the environment, blending with the dim, bioluminescent corridors of the alien vessel. The iron architecture was strange, living metal that pulsed with energy, and walls that seemed to breathe. It was as if the ship itself was alive, watching them, sensing them. But the Revenants ignored the feeling. They had one mission: hijack the frigate, get close to the logistics carrier, and plant a series of nanobombs powerful enough to tear through its core. Inside the frigate, Zarn drones patrolled with no warning, spinning like mechanical spiders, scanning for intruders. Eric signaled his team with a flick of his fingers, and they moved silent takedowns, blade to circuits, not a single sound. One wrong step, one stray sound, and the entire fleet would turn its weapons toward them. But the Revenants worked like a single mind. No orders were needed. No hesitation. In less than 20 minutes, the frigate's command center was under their control. A hacking unit connected with the ship's system, rerouting its course to fly directly toward the carrier under the cover of a fleet formation. The disguise was risky, but the Exarn command structure relied so much on automation that no one questioned the sudden course change. As the frigate drifted closer to the logistics carrier, the massive structure loomed in front of them, surrounded by spike-like defense towers and guarded docking bays. Any other team would have stopped there, turned back, or tried to escape. But the Revenants launched instead, blasting out in silent pods that attached themselves to the underbelly of the great vessel. There was no going back now. Inside the carrier, the environment changed completely. It was darker, denser, with alien sounds echoing through the walls, low growls, mechanical screeches, and the unsettling hum of power that felt almost alive. The ship carried more than just weapons. It held breeding chambers, storage bays filled with organic weapons, and labs where captured species were turned into biological tools of war. The Revenants knew they couldn't afford mistakes. Every corner could hide a new threat. Their route took them through maintenance shafts, barely wide enough to crawl through, past walls lined with glowing alien runes and strange organic growths. Twice they had to stop, freezing in place as Exarn warbeasts passed just inches away, sniffing the air. One even paused, sensing something out of place, but a well-thrown decoy lured it away. The team moved like smoke, appearing and disappearing before any alarm could be triggered. At the heart of the ship, they found their target, a reactor chamber filled with power conduit, stretching like spider legs across the ship's core. It pulsed with life, feeding the entire carrier and guarded by towering creatures covered in armor made from the bones of fallen enemies. The Revenants didn't wait. They activated their combat mode, becoming blurs of violence. Eric charged first, blades in hand, slicing through armor as if it were paper. His team followed, unleashing weapons that screamed with energy, cutting through walls and enemies alike. The Exarn responded with fury, shrieking in their alien tongue, and the chamber became a storm of chaos and fire. But the Revenants didn't break. They planted the nanobombs across the conduits, setting the timers while holding the enemy at bay. Explosions shook the walls, but the team fought their way back, retreating into maintenance shafts as alarms finally blared. The ship was coming alive, too late to save itself. Creatures poured from the walls, but the Revenants moved with brutal efficiency, knowing every second counted. They reached the outer hull, fired their extraction beacons, and were pulled back into their stealth ship just as the first wave of shock erupted through the carrier's core. From a distance, the explosion looked like a small star being born, light tearing through the darkness, and the great Zarn vessel split apart like a cracked egg, scattering debris across the fleet. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Signals scrambled, ships collided in confusion. In that moment of chaos, the Revenants vanished again, lost in the blackness of space, their mission complete. They left no message, no signal, no trace, only fire, fear. The sky over New Kyoto was no longer blue. It had turned into a swirling mix of ash, smoke, and glowing streaks from falling debris. Earth's defenses were gone, its orbit shattered, cities burning, and millions lost. Yet, amidst all the destruction, one stronghold remained untouched, an underground fortress hidden beneath the mountains, where the last human generals, soldiers, and scientists gathered for what many believed would be their final stand. The Revenants had returned from their mission behind enemy lines, their bodies bruised, their armor cracked, but their spirits still burning with purpose. The destruction of the Exarn logistics carrier had thrown the enemy into confusion, and Earth had one last window to fight back, not with numbers, not with fleets, but with something more terrifying: determination. Commander Eric Dane stood before a war map, blinking with red lights, each one a Xarn ship moving closer. He knew the odds, knew the weight pressing on every soul beneath the mountain, but he also knew what was at stake. If Earth fell, there would be no one left to resist. The Xarn would spread across the galaxy, unstoppable. So he made a decision that no artificial intelligence, no war council, and no alien tactician could understand. He would draw the line here, not to survive, but to show the enemy what it truly meant to fight humans. Around him, engineers scrambled to reroute power from collapsed cities, redirecting it into experimental weapons that had never seen battle. Scientists loaded viral codes into satellites, preparing to corrupt the enemy's communication with chaos. Children too young to fight carried supplies. Old veterans returned to the field with prosthetic limbs and burning eyes. And above them, in the sky still under siege, Earth's last surviving gun satellites powered up one by one, their cores humming with stolen alien energy. It was not just a defense, it was a message. As the Exarn fleet approached, expecting another easy victory, they were met not with silence, but a sudden storm of fire and resistance. The skies lit up with anti-orbital cannons hidden beneath ruined cities. Human fighter craft, thought extinct, burst from underground bunkers and ripped through the enemy ranks like vengeful ghosts. But the real surprise came when the Revenants launched their counter-assault, not against the ships in orbit, but directly onto the Xarn command vessel descending toward Earth's surface. Using drop pods reinforced with alien alloys, they tore through the atmosphere and crashed straight into the heart of the Xarn flagship. Inside, chaos erupted. The Xarn, still disoriented by the collapse of their logistics systems, had no answer to a strike so bold and insane. While explosions echoed outside, the Revenants pushed deeper, destroying command cores, hacking control systems, and planting pulse bombs that shattered the vessel from within. It was not a full-scale battle, it was a symbol, a statement, a scream of resistance so loud that even the enemy couldn't ignore it. But back on Earth, the real stand was just beginning. In New Kyoto, a massive Xarn landing craft tore through the sky, sending shockwaves that leveled buildings. It landed with a bone-shaking crash, unfolding into a mobile warbase that began releasing ground units in waves. And yet, waiting for them were farmers with rifles, doctors with makeshift explosives, and soldiers who hadn't seen rest in weeks. Eric arrived at the front lines just as the battle turned desperate. Bullets flew. Alien claws slashed. And still, the humans stood their ground. They used ruins as cover, turned destroyed vehicles into traps, and fought with a fury that made even the most advanced Xarn warriors pause. No one expected them to last more than an hour. They lasted 12. When supplies ran out, they fought with knives. When knives broke, they fought with fists. And when their bodies collapsed from exhaustion, they still crawled forward to block the enemy's path. It wasn't the size of the human force that mattered. It was their will, their refusal to back down. Every time a Xarn commander sent a fresh wave of troops, the humans pushed back harder. What was meant to be a swift occupation became a nightmare for the invaders. Surveillance drones captured the battle in real time and broadcasted it across the galaxy. Billions watched as a species on the edge of extinction refused to surrender. Even the Xarn Council, far away on their homeworld, began to question their strategy. Who were these beings who destroyed their logistics fleet, infiltrated their ships, and now stood toe-to-toe with elite ground forces, using nothing but courage and burning hearts? In the final hour of the battle, Eric stood atop a ruined tower with a wounded flag in his hand. Around him, the city was torn apart, but the Xarn were retreating, confused, disorganized, terrified. Not by numbers, not by weapons, but by the realization that humans would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. A single revenant, covered in blood and ash, walked through the battlefield carrying a wounded child, and for a moment, Even the alien drones stopped recording. Something had shifted in that stand. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was defiance. It was proof. The galaxy would never forget what they saw in New Kyoto, and neither would the Exarn. The humans had made their stand, and the war would never be the same again. The sky above Earth was still covered in dark clouds, thick with smoke and shadow from the battles that had shaken the planet's core. But beneath that broken sky, something powerful was rising, not just in machines or strategy, but in spirit. After the stand at New Kyoto, the entire galaxy had shifted its attention to humanity. Once seen as weak, scattered, and doomed, humans had shown something no enemy could measure: unbreakable will. Across distant worlds, other species under Exarn rule began whispering the name human with something new hope. The enemy, once confident and cold, now moved with hesitation. And it was at this precise moment, when the war seemed balanced on a knife's edge, that humanity prepared for the most daring strike in its history. It was no longer just about survival. It was about taking the war to the stars. Deep beneath the mountains of the ruined Eastern Alliance, inside the rebuilt control hub known as Haven Core, Commanders Eric Dane and Celine Marlowe stood before a display of enemy territory, their eyes locked on one planet, Zarn Prime. The idea of striking the heart of the enemy was madness, but madness had become humanity's strength. Operation Eclipse would not be a full invasion. It would be a surgical strike, targeting the Exarn's central neural relay, the system that connected their minds, drones, and ships across the galaxy. If that relay was destroyed, their entire war network would collapse into silence and confusion. But there was a catch. The neural relay was located inside a fortress buried beneath the surface of Zarn Prime, guarded by storms, fleets, and elite warriors bred for a single-purpose defense. No one had ever made it past the outer perimeter. No one had ever tried. Until now, the Revenants, the same human strike team that had brought down the logistics fleet and stormed the Exarn command ship, were chosen once more. They knew the risks. Every one of them had already accepted death. But this mission wasn't about survival. It was about ending the war. The team prepared in silence, boarding a stealth-capable shuttle powered by stolen Arn cores. As they launched into deep space, the rest of humanity watched from the shadows, holding its breath. In the darkness of space, the ship slipped through enemy lines unnoticed, weaving past patrols and scanning fields. When it finally reached orbit around Zarn Prime, the surface glowed like a machine heart pulsing, alive, dangerous. The drop began, and the Revenants plunged through the atmosphere in. Territory was silent because the species didn't speak. They connected through pulses and signals. But that silence was soon shattered by explosions, gunfire, and the sound of metal against metal. While the Revenants carved a path toward the neural relay, back on Earth, a second operation began. Human scientists activated a disruption wave that mimicked the neural signals of the Exarn, causing temporary confusion among enemy fleets orbiting allied planets. Suddenly, ships powered down mid-flight, drones fell from the sky, and commanders were forced to retreat. For the first time, the Exarn war machine showed cracks. Panic spread across their controlled systems. Resistance groups in occupied sectors launched surprise attacks inspired by Earth's stand. Minor species who had once bowed in fear now joined in rebellion. The war had become something more than a battle between two forces. It had become a galaxy-wide uprising. Inside the Exarn fortress, the Revenants finally reached the relay chamber, a massive room glowing with blue and green lights, humming like a giant brain. The relay core stood in the center, protected by energy shields and deadly defense systems. The last stand of the Revenants began there. As they planted charges around the chamber, the enemy unleashed its final guard hybrid soldiers faster and stronger than anything humanity had faced. The battle was brutal. Bodies fell. Blood mixed with sparks. One by one, the Revenants were wounded, but none of them stepped back. Even when injured, they pushed forward. Even when surrounded, they struck with fury. Commander Celine, bleeding and breathless, reached the core and detonated the final charge. The entire relay system collapsed in a pulse so strong it echoed across space. In an instant, Zarn fleets everywhere went silent. Ships lost coordination. Drones fell still. Communications died. Their entire war machine, built on perfect connection and control, was shattered in a heartbeat. Back on Earth, human commanders launched their final wave. Allied fleets, rebuilt in secret, entered the battlefield with a storm of fire. They didn't meet resistance. They met confusion. The enemy, once invincible, now fought like wild animals without leadership. One by one, planets fell back into freedom. The war had not ended, but it had turned. It was no longer a fight for survival. It was a hunt for liberation. And it all began with that one act, that single moment when a handful of humans chose to dive into the heart of darkness, not with hope of return, but with the hope of change. The galaxy had witnessed strength before. It had seen conquest, cruelty, and fear. But it had never seen humans rise together with such fury and purpose, never seen such unity born from despair. That was the turning point of the Galactic War, not a weapon, not a treaty, but a choice made in silence by those who refused to give up.